2023 is gone. It's now in our rearview mirror, and Button Press Graphics is back with a whole load of new videos. Welcome to 2024. Hello my friends, welcome to 2024 and Happy New Year. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas and New Year celebration, but it is now 2024 and we are back with some more videos, and today I'm going to be starting with a bang. I am going to be showing you how to make these stylized pictures from literally any photograph or picture that you want to use as a template. So without further ado, let's get started. First off, let me introduce Floki. That's Loki, but with an F in front. If you know, you know. This is our new dog that we got last year. He is just about to turn 1 year old, and I'm going to use him as my basis for today's design. Now, to begin with, what we are going to do, we are going to map out exactly what shape his head is. So, for example, I am going to go around his entire head, but this bit here I am not going to include. I just want to get around his head. And the only reason I've cropped around the entire body for Floki, I just wanted to make sure that you had a full picture of what I'm working with. So in order to do this, we are going to start with a base shape, and it's going to cover the entire shape of his head. So for it, we need the pen tool. You can find the pen tool on the left hand side, and as you might have noticed, I have made all the icons bigger so it's easier for you lot to see exactly what I am doing. And as an added little extra, there was a few comments last year asking me how I managed to get my icons and the colour scheme that I have within Inkscape. Well, I can show you that very quickly now. If you come up to Edit, scroll all the way down to the bottom and click Preferences, you will get this box open up. Now, under the Interface and Theming tab, you can now change your theme. You can use a dark theme if you wanted, which is only available to certain ones. Minwata Inkscape, you can use that and then use the dark theme on this. Now the font scale is exactly what it says. That is the size of the font that you will see. So everything from file to help and all these text parts. Then you've got your contrast, which is self-explanatory, and of course you can use the system icons or you can use any of the others, which will all have their own unique look. So I suggest playing around with them and finding a theme and a look that you personally like. Now with the pen tool enabled, we are just going to quickly outline the entire head for Floki. Now that we've got the outline complete, we are going to use the dropper tool to get the overriding colour for Floki. So we're going to come to the dropper tool and then we are going to click and drag to get an area within Floki's head. But I am making sure not to include the eyes or any darker areas. Now with that selected, we are going to open our fill and stroke menu, and if you haven't got the fill and stroke menu, you can find it as always up on the top toolbar right here. Click this and it will open up this window on the right hand side. Now this is a little bit too dark for what I want, so I'm going to make sure that this is the lightest shade of Floki's fur that I can use. Once I've done that, we're going to come down to the bottom left corner, and of course we are going to take the stroke off. We're going to do that by holding Shift and selecting the red X. And as you can see, it's taken off the border. And now we are going to drop the opacity down into 50% there or thereabouts. That's just so we can see all the details underneath the shape that we have just created. Now, as you can see, if I zoom in and I turn the opacity down even more, all the different areas on his fur, you can see there are darker areas like here, and then there are lighter areas above his eyes right here, and of course around his nose. Forgive the slobber, he was very excited to go out for a walk on that day. So what we want to do is go higher and higher with the layers. Now normally you can do it in around 3 layers. So what I'm going to do, I have got the light layer already selected. If I put that back up to around 50%. So what I'm going to do now is get the slightly darker areas. So the areas that I'm talking about in particular are the dark areas. We want to make sure we get the darker areas sorted before we add any highlights. Now it's worth mentioning before I start that if there are any areas that you want to colour in and it goes right up to the edge of the picture, you can by all means just go around and overlap it, because you can use the path difference or path intersection in order to clip or change any of the shapes so it matches perfectly with the rest. Now, as you can see, I have made 3 little areas, but you do not have to worry when it comes to these areas being perfect. As you can see, there is a spike up here and there is nothing on this side, because I am simply following where the light is shining and the different color variations between all the different shapes within Floki's head. Now the reason for this is because I am not going to be keeping the border around. All I'm going to be doing is making this colour slightly darker than the one underneath it. And also there is another little hint. As you can see, as soon as I put this shape over the top of the photo, it drops the colour saturation significantly. So sometimes it might not be easy to see the different variations of colour. Well, you can remedy this and it will not be destructive. And by a non-destructive process, that means that you can always revert it back later. Now, in order to do this, we are going to come to our select tool, select the bottom shape that I made, and then we are going to go to our layers menu. If you haven't got the layers menu open, you can find it signified by these 3 dashes on the top toolbar that say open objects. Click that and it will open something that looks a little bit like this. Now, in order to turn this off, we come to the path that is selected and highlighted here. We come across to where the eyeball is and we select that. And as you can see, now we get all the detail back again, and you can see exactly which area I copied. Now, if there are areas within the shape that you've just created that you don't want to be there, you can by all means select that area and then use difference in order to cut the shapes out. An example of this is if I was to draw a square. and then the circle from the center of it. If I use the select tool, I can select the shape that I want to remove, select the shape I want to remove it from, and then go to Path, Difference. And as you can see, it has now cut out the shape from the center. That's basically how it works. But while we are on the subject of the layers menu, remember from a previous video, you can select your template and then come up to your template that's highlighted in your layers menu, come all the way across and press the padlock. With a simple click, this will lock your template into place so it cannot move unless you unlock it first. Now for the ears, we just want to select the shape that we created for Floki's head, and then we are going to right click and duplicate, and then we are going to right click, duplicate, and one more time right click, duplicate. Now the reason I have done this is so I can show you the process of cutting out shapes or making the shapes match up perfectly with the rest of the image. Now for one of his ears, I am going to keep this top shape selected, hold shift and select the ear shape. With them both selected, we're going to go to Path, Intersection. And then we're going to repeat this process for the other two shapes, just to show you, even though I don't really need to do it for the darker areas within his head, because none of the lines go over the edge of the base shape. So select the shape, select the ear, Path, Intersection. And one more time, select the base shape, and then if you look, I will not be able to select the shape underneath, no matter where I click. Well, there is a simple way around that. Once you have got the base shape selected, hold Alt and Shift together and select. And then you can release Alt and Shift. What this has done has allowed you to select the shape underneath. The shape underneath cannot normally be selected, but if you are holding Alt, you will be able to select shapes that appear underneath the shape that you are selecting. And you can keep the Alt key held and keep pressing until you get to the relevant shape if there are multiple layers. So in this case, by holding Shift, that allows you to select multiple objects at the same time, and then holding Alt will allow you to select the shape underneath. Again, then we come to Path, Intersection. And now we have three completely different shapes over the top of the main base shape. Every single time that you do this process, you will need a separate copy of the shape that you are trying to alter. If you try and use your base copy and then use the intersection, everything else away from the main shape that you're trying to use will be cut off. Now for these shapes, we can select all three of them. Come down to the bottom left corner and hold Shift, pressing the red X to get rid of the stroke. And then we can come back to our fill and stroke menu. And we are going to use a fill. Now, as you can see, this is the color of the base, but with full opacity. We want to make it slightly darker and slightly more saturation for the color. So I'm going to just move that up slightly and move the darkness down. But we don't want it to be too dark, we just want it to be noticeable. Of course, you can just select the bottom layer and turn the opacity up, and now you can see the difference. So if I select this shape, you can then alter it until you get the color that you want. And if you already have the color that you want on one piece but not the others, you can simply select every other shape that you want to use, come to the dropper tool, which you can find right here within the fill and stroke menu. Over here, on the left toolbar, or you can just press D to get your dropper tool. Select the color that you want and it will automatically change it for you. Now, as you can see, this is pretty decent, but I would like this color to be the base color and then these to be slightly darker. So I'm going to select all three of these, and because I want them to all be the same color, I can also just go to Path, Union, and now it is one complete shape. If I turn that darker, and now with that done, I can select the base shape, use the dropper tool, and there you go. Now if I select the other shapes on top, I can darken them. And as you can see, that looks far, far better. But when you are finished, remember to go to your layers menu and either make them invisible or go to your fill and stroke menu and turn the opacity down. For this, I am going to make them invisible. Now the areas that I want to include are the darkest colored areas. So the area here that looks like almost a crucifix and the ripples that come around here. Now while I do this, it is worth mentioning that this is the layer that is going to add the most detail. Now, like I said earlier, it doesn't need to be perfect, just an approximation of what you are looking for. Now, as you can see, I've left most of the area around here and here and here, including the pinkness of the ears, completely alone. I don't want to touch them because that is where I'm going to be adding extra colors and highlights. So now with everything selected, we can select just one of these pieces, and because we have turned the borders off on everything else, if we select one piece, we can come to Edit, scroll down to where it says Select Same, and then we can select Stroke Color or Stroke Style. Either would do, as they're all the same. And as you can see, it's now selected everything. So by simply going to Path, Union, we can combine them all together, and then we can change the color to match something a little bit more like this. Now I've shown you different methods that you can use to do this, but this time we are going to use the drop tool. We're going to click and drag over a little area within the middle, and that will give us the average color like so. Now with that done, we are going to come down to the X in the bottom left corner, and again hold Shift and select it to take off the border. Now at the moment we have Floki looking like a pirate because I covered one eye. As you can see, the light was coming in from the left hand side when I took the photo, so the right eye, or his left eye, is going to be darker. And the reason I've done that is because if I was to turn this off temporarily, as you can see, there is a darker area around the eye, whereas this one is very much lit. You can see the whiter areas here. Next, the area I want to do is the highlights. Now, as you can see, there are very few highlights. So there is an area here above each eye, which is quite light. There is this one that I've just mentioned around his left eye. Then there are the little highlights here, the ears, and of course, there is a big section around his mouth and his nose. So that's going to be the next area that I tackle. It's going to be the nose and these little areas here. And there you go. For the highlights, we are now done. Again, if I select one shape, go to edit, select same, and then use stroke color, for example, it will select all the shapes that I've just created. We can then go to path, union. And now with that selected, we are going to use the same method, dropper tool, select the area from inside we've just created, take away the border. And now when we add everything else, as you can see, the layers are now making up quite a lot of detail. But as you can see, there are areas like this that are over the edge and it doesn't look right. Well, we can still use the exact same process that I showed you earlier by using the select tool. Select the piece we want to cut away from. And then we're going to duplicate, select the shape we want to cut, and then go to path, intersection. And if I zoom in, as you can see, it's cut away all the pieces that went over the edge. If I zoom right in, that doesn't quite look right. Obviously, I am just trying to go through this quickly. You can be more specific, and like here, that doesn't really match. You can alter it by all means by double clicking on it when you've got the select tool enabled. And you can do things like select a node and hit delete. Now that won't make it perfect, and you may have to tweak the line a little bit more, but as you can see, just for now, that makes a world of difference. And again, right here, it's not matched up correctly. Delete, and then bend the line to however you would like it. So now all I am left to do is to clip this bit. So we're going to come here, select the back shape. Then with it selected, we're going to right click, duplicate, select the shape, and go to path, intersection. And as you can see, it has now molded to the overall shape. Now at the moment, it looks like a jumble of shapes, but the next stage is where we are going to find all the details make all the difference. These details are going to contain all the darkest areas, like the eyes and the mouth, and not to forget the nose. As for this area here, it looks like lots of little dots, which is what we will add at a later point. Now, because these are the details, it does pay to be exact for these. But of course, unless you have got a very, very decent phone or a professional camera, it's going to be very, very hard when they are pixelated in the way that they are. But you do not have to be exact, but the more exact you are, the better it will be. And there you go. Now again, we are going to use the same process we used previously by going to edit, select same, stroke color, then coming down to turn off the border, and then using the dropper tool to select an area of his nose, for example, which is just off black. And then with them all done, we're going to go to path, union. Now again, we are going to repeat the same process again. We are going to turn everything on visible, so it's visible. Now for this next part, I want to show you a problem that you might come into. As you can see, when you select this shape and you've duplicated it, these two pieces of the main shape that we've just created do not overlap this shape here. So if we was to select both of these in the same way that we did previously and then go to path, intersection, it will get rid of everything outside of this shape. That's not what we want for this. So I'm going to Control Z, and this time with just these areas, instead of going to Union, we can always select Path, Break Apart. What that has done has reverted the pieces into their component parts again. So holding Shift, I'm going to select both of the eye sockets that we have just created, and then we are going to go to Path, Union. So what that has done has joined these two shapes that are underneath this one together while leaving both of the eye sockets alone. So now when we select both by holding Shift and selecting them, we can go to Path, Intersection, and then with holding Shift we can select both of the eye sockets, go back to Path and Union, and there you go. And now when I zoom out slightly, as you can see, all them jumble of shapes are now starting to come to life, all because of the details. Again, we're going to turn the visibility off all of the layers, and now we are going to select the whites of the eyes here. They are not particularly visible, but I do want to include them because when I add the black of the eyes before I add the reflections, you are going to notice a massive difference. The same can be said when it comes to the teeth. So that is what I am going to create. But just so you know, I'm going to create a full shape. So I will select the left hand side of this white, the right hand side of this one, and then just join them up so it's one complete shape, and I can always layer the circle of the eye over the top. And there you go. Now by going to the Select tool and then holding Shift to select both of them, like so, I can zoom right in, use the dropper tool to get the whites, and if you do not think that that's white enough, you can always go back to your fill and stroke menu and lighten it as much as you want. Now of course this is not completely white. No one's eyes tend to be completely white unless altered post-production. That would be good enough for what I am looking for. So with that done, I'm going to come back down to the bottom left hand corner, click X to get rid of the border, and now we can move on to creating the eyes. Now for this part you might find that snapping would get in the way, so make sure that snapping is turned off. If it is enabled, come to the top corner here and just make sure that it's unchecked. Now while I'm creating the circle, I am wanting to hold Shift and Control to make sure it is a perfect circle. If the picture that you're using is not a perfect circle, you can always edit it in post-production. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to use the pen tool to just create an added extra layer by coming up and around the entire shape, because if you remember, we already have the shape underneath. So now if we come back to our layers menu, and we turn on the top shape, which is the top shape that is currently not visible, that will be the layer we created previous to the ones we've just done now. Now that we can see, we are going to use the select tool. We're going to select both the shape we've just created and the circle, then go to Path, Union. And we're going to do that for both eyes, Path, Union. And now we are going to select the shape that we previously created, this dark area here, select it, and then we are going to right click, duplicate, right click, duplicate again. And now that we've duplicated, we are going to select the black areas, and we are going to join them together by going to Path, Union. And then once we select the area that we created for the eye sockets and the eyes themselves, we can go to Path, I'm sure you know by now, Intersection. And as you can see, the eyes look way better now. Finally, we want to turn the visibility off again. And then these top 3 layers here are the layers that we have just created. We're going to turn them off as well. And now all we want to do is create some small circles or shapes that give the illusion of the reflection in the eye. And then we are going to do the other eye as well. And now we are going to use the select tool, hold shift and select both of the shapes, turn them white by coming down to the bottom left, selecting white, and then of course again hold shift and click the X to get rid of the outline. Now just to show you, if I was to turn everything off, you've got the full picture, but if I was to turn everything on, as you can see, the picture is coming to life. There is a good trick when it comes to reflections. When you're looking at reflections in the eye, they are very rarely sharp reflections. So select both of these, go to your fill and stroke and turn the blur up, but only very, very slightly. So 7%, I've got it on 7.7, and as you can see, now they look a lot more convincing. Now I'm going to go back to the layers. I'm going to turn the visibility of everything off again. Now the areas I'm going to concentrate on are the nostrils for his nose. I'm going to do a very thin line here to separate his nose. Then I'm going to do the white of his teeth. And then I'm going to add a little area here for the pinkness of his tongue and the gums around his teeth. now I'm just going to select these darker areas first before I go on to this shape and this one for the gums, and then do the tongue. I'm going to do the teeth last as they are the easiest to do. Now, one thing worth mentioning, I am trying to cut out one part of this shape here. I'm going to select this darker area. I'm going to right click, duplicate, and then select this black area on its own and use the same intersection method. And as you can see, now it's created this, but I am still going to keep this selected on its own, not union it with these three shapes here just yet. The reason for that is because when I do the tongue, it is going to overlap this one, and I'm going to need to use this shape again in the future. So that's something just worth keeping in mind when you are using the intersection method. Now I've completed the teeth, I just need to hold shift, select them all together. And unlike the reflection, I am not simply going to make these pearling white. I am going to make them just off white. I'm going to use the dropper tool yet again. Select the full area, and as you can see, it's not quite white. Especially if you look down here, this is the bright brilliant white as it's called, and this is almost magnolia in color. But as you can see, there you go. And now if we hold shift, we take away the border, and then we can come to, I think it was path 11. It was. We can turn the visibility of that on, and with all these still selected, we can go to path, union, and then using the select tool, we can select the shape underneath, and you know the score by now. Right click, duplicate, and then hold shift, select the shape we just created, and go to path, intersection. Now finally, all we have to do is the pink for the tongue and the ears. But before we get to that, if I was to turn this visibility off, there is that slight reflection and that slight darker area here just underneath the teeth. So what I'm going to do is exactly what I have done previously. I am going to make this area here slightly lighter than the main area underneath. And then I'm going to make another separate shape which is slightly darker and covers the teeth, or at least the bottom of the teeth. And now with the tongue, what we are going to do, as you can see, I have just overlapped pretty much everything else. So once we have got that shape, we are going to use the select tool, select the dark shadowed area above the tongue. We are going to right click, duplicate, and then we're going to come to the teeth and we're going to right click and duplicate on them as well. Now we can start with either of the shapes, but I'm going to start with the teeth as seen as they're already selected. And with them selected, I am going to select the tongue. But this time when we go to path, we are not going to use intersection because this would happen if we did. We are going to select the teeth, the tongue, and then go to path, difference. Now it doesn't look like that much has changed, but if I was to grab the tongue and move it out of the way, as you can see, there is now an imprint of where the teeth are. So we're going to repeat this, but this time we're going to use this top shape. Just like so. And finally, we are going to go to our layers menu. I believe it was number 11. It is. We are going to select that shape. And then we are going to right click, duplicate. Then we're going to select the pink of the tongue, holding shift while we do. Then go to path, intersection. And as you can see, it's now cut off any overlapping parts. And now finally, the last thing that we need to do is the ears. Now for this, as you can tell, there is a lot of hair all over the ears. So even though we want to create a pinkish glow to the ears, what I am going to do is just add some random spikes to give the impression of hair. Now as you can see, I've only put the spikes coming in from the right hand side here, and I've left the left hand side smooth. The reason for this is because all of the hairs are flowing in this direction. So only leaving the spikes on one side gives you a rough estimate and the impression that the hair is coming from one side. And now with both of them done, I can go back to the select tool, select them both, go to path, union, and then of course the dropper tool. And then if I want to alter the color in any way, I can always use the fill and stroke menu. I'm just going to give it a little bit more of a pinkish tint, like so. And of course, turning off the stroke or the border is going to help massively as well. And that is it, pretty much done. Now that I've zoomed out, you can see the picture that we began with. And by using the layers menu, if we select the top shape, scroll down to the bottom shape, hold shift and select that, it's an easier way of selecting everything when you can't see it. And then we can turn everything back on, deselect off the canvas, turn off the visibility of the picture, and there you go. Now this works literally on any picture. Like you saw in the intro, it can be used on pretty much anything. You now know how to do a stylized version of any picture you like, and the best of all, there isn't a single AI in sight. Now please let me know if you found this useful, and if you do choose to stylize your pictures, I would love to see your designs. I have had quite a few sent in to me, and I will be putting a Creative Corner video together very soon. If you would like to be featured in that Creative Corner video, please send me your work. I would love to showcase it on the channel. But for now, that's it. If you found this useful, please let me know in the comments, and consider giving me a subscribe if you liked this video. Until next time, I'm going to bid you all a fond farewell, say thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.